Yeah, good evening once again, and let's move on. So this is a favorite serial of mine. I watch it every time it comes as a rerun. I'm sure some of you might be familiar with it, called The Big Bang Theory. And very incidentally, that the field of positive psychology actually came about more or less with a Big Bang Theory kind of moment. The gentleman who actually sort of propagated the theory of positive psychology is a person known as Professor Martin Seligman. And he's been around for a number of years. And probably late 70s or mid 70s is when he started toying with this field, because he was actually quite upset at what was happening at that time. You know, the era of psychology at that time was focusing mainly on the kind of stuff which we talk about. You know, why does a person behave in a particular way? Because of trauma, because of suffering, because of pain, because of mental illness, so on and so forth. But his concern was that nobody was focusing on the fact that, you know, there is another side to the field of psychology, and that's well-being, that's, you know, strengths, flourishing, exceptionalism, happiness, joy, and what have you. And he also sort of came out with this one-liner saying that, and that's what I put down there, is that positive psychology is the scientific study of what makes life most worth living. And that's a question that we should all be pondering. What is it that makes life worth living for us? I mean, why do you get up and do what you do every day? I won't even say go to work, because the definition of work has changed, especially in the last 6 months. But why do you get up and do what you do every day? There has to be a reason for it. And if that makes your life worthwhile or worth living, or gives you happiness and joy, helps you to discover your strengths and flourish in the areas that you are, then the study of that, or the scientific study of that, is exactly what positive psychology is all about. And his theory, his Big Bang theory, states that there are basically three areas where positive psychology focuses. And one is obviously the experiences. So I would like to say that there are three things in life which make us who we are. And it's a kind of a benchmark theory of mine, where we say experience, we talk about environment, and we talk about education. So experience, obviously the experiences that we go through in our life, the kind of people we interact with, the kind of things we do, or the things that people do to us or do with us, etc. The environment is the kind of environment that we grow up in, we play in, we go to educational institutions in, we work in, a familial environment, etc. And education is not about the degrees that we pick up along the way, but more about the life skills that we pick up along the way. Similarly, Professor Seligman has three P's. So the first P is positive experiences, which are basically things like happiness, joy, love, being inspired, etc. The second P is the state of mind, or positive states of mind. So resilience, gratitude, compassion. We keep hearing this expression saying one should have an attitude of gratitude. So that's what he's talking about, the gratitude and the resilience and the compassion. Today we call compassion, we define it as empathy. No, we don't use compassion much more, we use empathy. And then positive institutions, basically the third P is, how do you apply these principles in the overall framework in which you are in? So your organizations, your institutions, and institutions could be your familiar institutions as well. They don't necessarily need to be places that you work. So this is what happened. And if I'm not mistaken, in 1998, Professor Seligman was elected as the president of the American Psychology Association. And that's exactly when he started propounding his theory in a big way. And so when we say that the field of positive psychology is very new, it's absolutely right, because it's been around in the form that we are understanding today, in a proper form where people are talking about it, people are studying about it, people are teaching it. It's only been about, 22 years. There's a different aspect to this, which I will focus on in another slide about the duration. But this is what we understand from Professor Seligman, who is actually known as the father of modern positive psychology. I'll move on to the next slide. Few things that we need to consider, telling it like it is. A lot of people have actually, and I've got a slide on the criticisms of positive psychology much later, but a lot of people actually refer to positive psychology as a pseudoscience, more like a feel-good factor kind of thing rather than a proper a scientific study of human emotions, etc. Well, I would like to say that that's absolutely incorrect. And positive psychology is also a science. It is a subfield of psychology. So like there are many subfields of psychology, and this is a subfield of psychology. And it is based obviously on the scientific method of evaluating the evidence and coming up with the theories and the evidence. But it is not to be confused with things like self-help and secular religion and other things which no doubt make you feel good, but they are not positive psychology. And neither is it a recycled version of the famous book called The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale, or the famous book and movie The Secret, which everybody keeps propagating all over the world saying, have you watched The Secret? Have you watched The Secret? It will transform your life. Yes, it will. It will. Definitely it will transform your life, but it's not positive psychology. So I would like to get that very clearly upfront with all of you wonderful people, that that is something different, and what we are talking about is something different. And actually, this is something which is again and again spoken about by two people, and one is obviously Christopher Peterson, and the other is Dr. Barbara Fredrickson, who both are, I could use the word lightly, but they are actually legends in the field of positive psychology. And Dr. Barbara Fredrickson is actually my mentor, and she is the one who sort of mentored me in this field, in the field of positive psychology. So very grateful to her to have shared her views with me. That's telling it like it is, and that's something which we need to understand, that this is not the secret, or this is not the power of positive thinking. However, I must add over here that if you have not read the book The Power of Positive Thinking, you must read it. It's a book by a person called Norman Vincent Peale. If you have not watched the movie The Secret or read the book The Secret, you must read that as well, because there are some very interesting subsets of this entire phenomena of what having a positive mindset does for you. So while it is not the same thing, it's important to be touched by those two pieces of literature, as it were. If I could move on to the next slide. Now let's understand what exactly the belief system of positive psychology is. Now, one of the major, and if you could say assumptions also, if you were more comfortable to do that. One of the major assumptions of positive psychology as a field is that, for the most part, most people are happy. Now, there are two mosts in the statement, and it is exactly meant to be written like that. Generally, if you come across people generally, they are happy. Yes, of course, everybody wants more of whatever. So we want more of love. We want more of, time with our loved ones. We want more of family. We want more of work. We want more of sport. We want more of leisure. That's besides. But in a generic sense, most people you come across are pretty happy with the way things are. And then again, of course, there are some people who are not. But then this is what positive psychology assumes. However, it also assumes and believes that happiness is one of the causes of the good things in life. And because that exists, it creates more happiness. So it's like when we say that too much knowledge, there's no such thing as too much knowledge. And that's absolutely right. There is a thing, let me say to you, and it's pretty funny coming from me. There is a thing as too many degrees. There is. But there's no such thing as too much knowledge. You can't have too much knowledge because it's endless. It's changing every day. I'll share a small example with you here. I watched a video today. Somebody sent it to me about how the education system is outdated. And I was very happy to see this video. And the reason for that was this is something that I've been saying for 10 years. There was a time when I was a principal of a college and a director of a college, and I even used to say to the chairman and the management of the board, saying that we're outdated. We're studying stuff which probably was relevant 50, 60 years back. It has no relevance today. And even our schools are outdated. So they are not upgrading themselves with knowledge. If they were to upgrade themselves with knowledge, then our children or the people who study in educational institutions would have more knowledge. But what they're having is more degrees. So therefore, relating this knowledge and happiness. So there can never be too much happiness. There's only more and more of happiness. And there can never be too much knowledge because there's only more and more knowledge to gain. That being said, most people are also pretty resilient. Now, when you hear the statement, I'm sure some of you must be wondering, what, are you sure? No, I don't think so. Because we see people crumbling at the drop of a hat. In fact, isn't it why today psychologists are so popular? Because people aren't able to deal with their own challenges by themselves. Well, looking at the size of the population in our world and in our country, it's a very small percentage of people who are actually not being able to deal with their own challenges, and that's why they need help. In fact, I would even go so far as to say, some people might find it a little funny, but I would go so far as to say even COVID, for that matter, we're all up in arms about the number of cases that are growing day by day. But have any of us realized that we not even touched 1% of our population? So, and in that condition, we are already not able to deal with it in terms of an infrastructural situation. So most people are actually pretty resilient. It's not the other way around. It's not that people are weak and they're not able to deal with their challenges and they need help all the time. That's not true. So this is one of the assumptions of positive psychology, that actually most people are pretty resilient. And that means that they're able to deal with their challenges in some manner or the other. Now, granted, it might not be the professional manner. It might not be a manner with certain boxes being ticked and certain methodologies and strategies and theories being tested. But most people have their own system of dealing with their challenges. Happiness, the strengths of your character and good social equations are the things that act as a buffer against disappointment and setbacks. So this is another key assumption of positive psychology, that when you're in a happy state of mind, and now I want to say something here, a happy state of mind doesn't mean a happy-go-lucky person. There's a huge difference between the two. And we'll talk about that. I have a particular term to describe such people, and I'll describe that later. So when you have a happiness state of mind, your character, or you have a pretty resilient character, you have an attitude of fortitude, and you have good social equations or relationships. These are the things that act as buffers against the disappointments and setbacks in your life. So there's two key things to remember here now. One, the key assumption is that, the part A of this key assumption is that happiness and strength of character, good social relationships exist. People have them and they act as buffers. And the second part of this assumption is that there are disappointments and setbacks coming your way. And if anybody tells you that they won't, I'm sorry, they're making a fool out of you. And if you believe that, then you're making a fool out of yourself, because life is meant to test you. That's one of the big assumptions here. It's not stated so clearly, but the underlying sentiment in this assumption is that life is going to test you. And for the most part, if you're happy, and happiness promotes more happiness, and you are resilient and have strength of character and good social relationships, you're able to build your buffer against disappointments and setbacks that come your way. And the fifth point, and here's where, again, this ties in with the fourth point, is it is actually the crises in our lives that reveal character. If everything was hunky-dory and everything was going well, you wouldn't be tested ever in your life. And therefore, your character wouldn't be revealed. So one of the things that positive psychology assumes is that there are crises, and these are the crises which reveal the character of a person. Coming to the sixth point, and if you notice, I've marked it in red, and there's a reason for that. And this is where personally I have a slightly different opinion, and I'm working on a theory, and I will only probably expound it once I've got enough evidence to empirically prove it. But what Professor Seligman stated was that other people matter in terms of what makes life worth living and worthwhile. And this is where I have a slight difference of opinion. My difference of opinion is not that other people don't matter. My difference of opinion is that which type of other people matter is very subjective and case specific. So for some people, the other people who matter might be people in the family, whereas for some other people, the people who matter might be people who are not in the family or at work or our friends or our associates or are even strangers. I have been working on this theory for a while, and it is taking me a little longer than I thought that it would, because I was also writing a book at the same time, which I published recently. So therefore, this is something where I sort of disagree slightly with Professor Seligman, and with due respect to him and his theory. I feel that it's case specific. It's not at all a generic thing. And we need to be very, very understanding of the fact that everybody's other people will be different. And that's what needs to be specified. And again, I've put the last point also in this slide, again in red, because again, I have a slight difference of opinion, and that's why I've added something. And of course, Professor Seligman says that religion matters, but I feel religion actually doesn't matter as much as spirituality. And I don't think it's an and or. I think spirituality is more important when it comes to positive psychology than religion, because it is spirituality that creates the feeling of mental worth and mental happiness and resilience, etc., 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 rather than religion. Because I think religion is probably something that doesn't really fit in the current frame of society. I think spirituality is something which fits in more, and hence that's what I've tried to give you two perspectives: the older perspective from when this came around, and said that religion matters, and the newer perspective from where spirituality matters. And I'd also like to add here on the fifth point where it says crisis reveal character. Actually, this is where one could actually say that positive psychology is as old as the 14th century. So there is scientific and historical evidence to prove that a group of monks who lived in the Greco-Roman kind of scenario were actually toying with the fact that the challenges in their lives were creating better people out of them. And while they didn't put it into formal structure, they actually, there is evidence that they have recorded this in writing, of course, saying that it was the crises in their lives that revealed their character, and therefore that is probably something that we can pull out an indirect reference to positive psychology as far back as 650 years ago. So we have two perspectives now. I shared with you that the first perspective is starting in the 70s, and then really in the year 1998 is when Professor Seligman was elected as president, and he started pushing this field. And then the others came in, like Christopher Peterson and Dr. Barbara Fredrickson, who's like the modern day guru. And then there's this other view that probably 650 years back, there were a group of monks who, unknowing to themselves, probably they didn't know what they were working on. They've actually proven that positive psychology was something that was being toyed with as far back as 650 years ago. All right, I'll move on. And this is also another slide on the belief system or the key assumptions. So here it says that, work also matters. And it depends on what you're trying to draw out of that work. Now, what's the meaning and the purpose of work in your life is what actually makes work matter, and therefore makes your life worth living. So it's the age-old argument of synthetic happiness versus real happiness, or loving what you do versus doing what you love. So, everybody can't do what they love. That's a given. But you can love what you do. So work matters in terms of making your life worth living. And that's one key assumption that positive psychology has. Another one, which is actually my favorite, the next two are my favorites, is that, money, many people might have said this to you, or you might have heard it in your experiences in life, but it is true. Money comes and goes with the ease that one can't put a finger on it. You'll see big money in your life one day, and you'll see no money in your life one day as well. But money has a diminishing law of return on your happiness factor. There was a famous study done in Harvard, and actually not in Harvard, but there were these students from Harvard who came to Madurai, and they did a study in a factory, and they discovered that after a certain point of time, money ceases to be an incentive to drive work. The basic nutshell result of the study was that if you pay people enough to take care of their needs and their greeds, then incentives have a diminishing return of work. So their performance actually goes down. It's the same thing here. Money can have some impact on your happiness, but over a period of time, the return will be diminishing. However, to counter that, you can derive happiness by spending money on other people. Now, whether you would choose to do that or not is a completely different discussion, and for another time. But the concept of money in positive psychology is that it can bring you some amount of happiness, but it diminishes over a period of time, and you can create happiness for others by spending money on them. And this one is my most favorite, if I can put it like that, although I don't think that's a correct phrase. But anyways, we're not going to get into that. So eudaimonia, or the well-being factor, a deeper form of satisfaction, is more important than hedonism, which is basically the sole focus on pleasure and positivity or positive things for yourself. So basically, hedonism is very self-centered, whereas eudaimonia is more macro in its approach. And interesting to note that both find a place in the theory of positive psychology. It's not that hedonism is being shunted out. Nobody is saying to you that hedonism is not good. All they're saying is that eudaimonia is better than hedonism when it comes to the assumptions of positive psychology. And that's very interesting because, well-being is something which actually is a theory in positive psychology, and we'll talk about that a couple of slides later. So we'll move on. Also, the heart matters more than the head, meaning that compassion is just as important as critical thinking. And we're seeing that today. We're seeing that leaders with an empathetic attitude or nature are being, hailed as leaders for the future. Whereas the leaders who are just using the critical thinking tool or come up with these innovative and radical and dynamic solutions, but leave out the empathy factor, are being also hailed, but not as much as the people who bring in empathy to the picture. And therefore, positive psychology assumes that the heart actually matters more than the head. And then, all good days have three things in common: competence, autonomy, connection to others, and obviously the last point, that this is something that can be taught. So I was once asked, when I wrote my first book in 2013 on leadership, I was asked, is leadership something that can be taught, or does it have to be inbuilt? And I said, well, I think it can be taught. And it's the same thing with the good life. I think it can be taught. You might have some attributes of it that exist in you thanks to those three E's: the environment, the education, and the experiences. But it needs to be taught to you. It's not necessary that you will know how to live the good life just because you have a few attributes in your psyche or your persona. All right. So we'll move on. Now, what's this all about? What can you do, or what can positive psychology do for a person? Or let's say you wanted to get into the field, and what would you be doing? What would be happening? There are some. Okay. All right. There are some things to consider, that what is it that I can do with this? What can I do for others? What can this do for others? And the most important thing is that you can, or the field can, positively impact a person's life. And that's why it's called positive psychology. It's not just called just psychology, it's positive psychology. And one of the things to remember is that once you impact a person's life, everything else feeds in from there. And in my experience, I have found that all of us have positive emotions running through our bodies throughout the day, but we do not experience all of them all the time, or as much as we can. And when we focus on this field, or when somebody guides us in this field, it is possible to increase that experience. And when you increase that experience, life becomes that much more vital, or it has that much more vitality, if I can put it like that. It also helps us to identify our strengths and our competences. It is something which helps us to point out the areas that we can focus on to get to where we want to be. Goal setting and goal striving. So everybody asks us to set goals. But when it comes to achieving the goals, there are 1,001 things that are told to us about why we can't. But positive psychology actually shows us that we have within us the ability to strive towards our goals and to achieve them, and to achieve more of them. And therefore, that also enables it to build a sense of hope into a person's perspective and create a sense of happiness and well-being, and most importantly, nurture the sense of gratitude. I can't stress more, I can't stress enough on this thing of the attitude of gratitude, and we spoke about it a few slides back. One of the key underlying principles of this field is that when you nurture a sense of gratitude in yourself, or when you enable people to nurture a sense of gratitude, things open up in a completely dynamic manner. The more gratitude you create in your life, the more things begin to become easier to access, whether it's people, whether it's relationships, whether it's success, depending on how you define success, whether it's helping people, whether it's going going and doing something that you always wanted to do, the more gratitude that you create in your life, the easier life becomes to achieve those things that you want to. And therefore, you also build and maintain healthy, positive equations with people and an optimistic outlook. Most importantly, you savor the positive experiences when they come around. I think if I was to to counter the point where we said that for the most part people are happy and for the most part people are resilient, while agreeing with that, I would say that there is also this challenge that while they might be resilient and while they might be happy, they don't savor the positive experiences enough. And that's when things begin to sort of take on a slightly tougher time and a tougher look and a tougher perspective, if I can use that word. So this is something which is very critical, that one of the major goals or achievements of positive psychology as a field is it helps you, or it helps people to savor every positive moment. And as we said, happiness promotes more happiness. So positive experiences, an attitude of gratitude, healthy equations, they all foster more positivity, more positive experiences, more positive ideas and savoring of the same. All right, let's move on. I would just like to check on the time. I think, yeah, we are okay. All right. So the theory of well-being, PERMA, and this is basically what this entire field rests on. It rests on this model or the theory of well-being introduced by Professor Seligman himself. And it's called PERMA. It stands for positive emotions, engagement, positive relationships, the meaning and accomplishment. So positive emotions obviously goes back to the first slide when we spoke about happiness, we spoke about joy, satisfaction, pride, awe, fascination, excitement. All of these are positive emotions. And this is one pillar, if I could call it, about this theory. The second one is the engagement. So this is where the theory of flow comes in. I don't know whether you have heard of the theory of flow, but and that's a very detailed subject, so we'll not get into that. But engagement indirectly and directly relates to the theory of flow, where we build upon our interests. So look at this. It's a very systematic way of doing things. P, the PERMA, the P of PERMA stands for the positive emotions that you build on: happiness, joy, satisfaction, excitement, awe, whatever. And then engagement is where the activities that you undertake to build upon your interests, and that's the theory of flow. And then there's the relationships, and I've already shared with you my theory that there are the different kind of sets of people, the others that matter. And that's why I think here probably Professor Seligman has tried to correct what was said earlier, and he says that there are work-related relationships, there are familial relationships, there are platonic relationships, there are romantic relationships, and this is what he's tried to sort of course correct over here. Although I still feel that there could be a lot of work in this particular subset of this wonderful subset of psychology called positive psychology. And then there's M, and this is a lovely one, and this is meaning. A few years back, a very famous gentleman called Simon Sinek, you must have heard of him, or you might have heard of him, came out with the 3 golden circles. And if you watch the video on YouTube, it's very interesting. So the theory basically is that there are 3 golden circles, and the golden circles are that one is that most people know what they need to do in life. They know how they need to do it, but they don't know why they need to do it. Finding your why. And that's basically where this part of PERMA comes in, the meaning. What's the meaning? What's the essence of your life? Why are you doing what you're doing? And I would submit to all of you wonderful people that if there's, one thing that I would like you to think about in your spare time when you sort of start debriefing this in your head is whatever you're doing today in your various stations of life, why are you doing it? Have you thought about it? You know what you're doing, you know how to do it, but do you know why you're doing it? And that's a very interesting question. And that would lead to many more whys. But Simon Sinek's theory of the three golden circles, the overall why, so mastery and things like that. And that's the A, the accomplishment, mastery and success. So why is the purpose, and accomplishment is the mastery and the success. So if we run it back again, the first part is about the emotions. So that's your excitement, your joy, your happiness, your awe, your fascination, satisfaction, whatever. The second part is the theory of flow, the engagement, the activities that build upon your interests. The third one is the relationships, and that's the kind of relationships that you have. So whether they're platonic, they're work-related, they're familial, they're romantic, they're associative, they're dysfunctional, all kinds of relationships. The meaning, which comes from the three golden circles. So you know what you're doing, you know how to do it, but do you know why you're doing it? And then there's accomplishment, so the sense of success and mastery of the task that you're undertaking. And that is the theory of well-being, PERMA, and that's what, as I said, in the third part, Professor Seligman has tried to course correct, but I still feel there's a lot of work to be done on that area. Who are those others that matter in your personal space? I'll move on to the next slide. I think there is a question from somebody. Okay, fine, there isn't. Sorry about that. And here we are with the criticisms of the field. And as I said in the beginning, that there are some people who have called this a pseudoscience, and they are not at all, taken up with this. They feel that the research findings are mostly invalid, often invalid. They're overstated and they're misleading. And the reason for that is that most of the data or data that you collect is all self-driven. So this is a very individualistic field. As of now, we're talking about now, because even though we know that there is evidence of people working on this field 650 years ago, the field as we know it in its modern avatar is just about 20, 25 years old, and officially recognized, and people now are doing a lot of work on it. As we speak at this very moment, I'm sure there are people like myself doing all kinds of research. I've already shared with you the kind of research that I'm trying to do. And let me tell you, it's not easy, because I'm trying to meet different people to understand how others connect into their life. It's like when I did my, when I wrote the book, I interviewed 55 different leaders across the country and outside the country, trying to understand what makes those leaders tick. Why are they different from other leaders? Why are they those super successful kind of personalities? So it's the same thing here, that there's a lot of work going on. So this criticism that research findings are invalid, overstated, misleading, while one could possibly sympathetically argue that yes, you are right at the moment, but one should also understand that the field being so new, there hasn't been enough time for experts in the field to do the amount of research that they need to do to be able to come up with the kind of answers that are required. There are a lot of people whom you may ask many questions about the field, and they may not be able to answer you because there aren't any answers, to be very honest. There's still research going on. And as I said, there is a lot of emphasis on self-report and cross-sectional survey of data, and that's true, it is. I mean, it's a fair criticism, because as I said, at the moment, there isn't any other way to do things. There aren't enough people who are going out, like I said to you, and trying to study others and trying to understand what's happening and then collate data. It's more self-driven. The third one, and this is also a very valid criticism, but again, you must understand that it's valid because the field is new. It has a cultural and ethnocentric bias, and that's true because most of the people who've been working on this field are are from an Aryan kind of background. They are Western philosophers or Western psychologists. They come from a predominantly white background, and they do their research predominantly amongst the whites. They have not been spreading their research outside of that circle of influence, if I was to use that word. And therefore, it does have a cultural and ethnocentric bias. And we are also learning about the overall field of psychology, that today we are realizing that many of the models that we used from the Jungian philosophy or the Jungian school of thought, they might not apply to a country like us, because the way we are brought up, the thinking, the background, the 3 E's, environment, experience, and education, very different. So we might need to completely, reinvent the wheel, so as to speak. So it is a valid criticism, but I would again say that the defense of this is that we haven't had enough time, and we don't have enough people who are actually going out there and taking this topic up as a specialization, first of all, learning about it, and then going out into the field and doing enough legwork to build the research to sort of confidently challenge these criticism or these critiques. And then obviously the field is individualistic. I've already said that, and this is what I wanted to say to you, that I said that there's a difference between happiness, the state of happiness, and a happy-go-lucky person. And that happy-go-lucky person is what we call the Pollyanna personality type. The Pollyanna personality type stands for a cheerful or bubbly or an extroverted, or if I was to go into the field of MBTI, an extraversion kind of person who gets their energy from others. But Pollyanna is exactly what that happy-go-lucky kind of thing is. But this is not true. Positive psychology is not a promotion of the Pollyanna personality type. It is a very scientific study of the state of happiness and how to increase it and the experiences that lead to increasing it, and so on and so forth. And that criticism, I would say, is rather unjustified, whereas the top 4 criticisms are pretty okay, with there being a reason for why it is like that. But the 5th one is I would say not true. And I think I'm bang on time. I was told I had 45 minutes, and I'm bang on time. So thank you for allowing me to share my views with you. And if there are any questions, I can take them. I don't know whether I'll be able to provide all the answers or any answers for that matter, but I'll try my best.
So everyone, you can start typing down all your questions in the chat, while there are a couple of questions which have been asked. Plus, Dr. Asad, I have a couple of queries as well.
Please.
So just a couple of years ago, Delhi government started this entire program of happiness curriculum in schools.
Yes.
So what is your take on that, and can happiness be taught?
Yes, to answer your question in one word, yes, it can. But it's not happiness, it's the attitude of happiness, I think. Let me clarify that. So I think how to recognize those good moments in your life, and therefore that creates a happiness moment for you, that can be taught, definitely. I think it's a very good move from the Delhi government, because look, I think if I'm not mistaken, the rationale behind them introducing it into the school curriculum is that a lot of the children are weighed down by the type of education. Our education is by rote. Our education is all about memorization and then vomiting what you memorize. It's not about understanding what you're learning. So I believe the intention is to create and foster the atmosphere in which children learn to develop this frame of happiness, so that helps them cope with the pressure that exists in the curriculum. I think it's a good move, but my question to the government and to any institution which is trying to promote this is, do you have the right kind of people to teach it? Because frankly, as per my research, there aren't that many people who can successfully teach this philosophy.
With that, there's a additional question to this, so I'll just ask right now, guys. I know there are a lot of questions which were asked before this question, but since it is connected, I'm asking right now. So Priya Darshini asked the question: how do we exactly define happiness?
You cannot define happiness. Happiness is different for every person, but it's a state of mind in which you feel positive, you feel successful, you feel as if you can take on all the challenges in the world, and whatever comes your way is a very small thing for you to overcome. I think that would be a good definition of happiness. But to give you a concrete definition would be very tough, because it's different for every person.
Thank you so much. So we have a interesting question which was asked to me privately, and the question is there any difference between optimism versus positive psychology, and how does realism come into the picture?
Okay, excellent. Nice question. So, look, if you remember a few slides back, we said building a sense of hope into a person's perspective. So, I would say that hope, optimism, whatever word you want to use, they're all part of the same family of words. And it's part of the entire approach of positive psychology. Realism is something which, like, we hear about it a lot, and people say to us that be realistic. To give you an example, everybody asks you to set smart goals, and one of the letters in that word smart is R, which stands for realistic. But to my mind, I mean, if you were realistic all the time, I don't think you would achieve much. So I would say realism is overrated. You need to keep it in your pocket for rare occasions and rare times. But positive psychology helps you to overcome that negating factor. And optimism is a part of that entire approach. I don't know whether I'm clear, but that's what I could say.
Okay. So while we were talking about how heart over head is quite important,
Yeah.
there was a statement which was made. So the question is: do you think that female leaders such as President of New Zealand, Arden, and Queen Rania of Jordan, that is the reason why they make better presidents, because they are using their heart over head?
Wow, what a lovely question. In tune with the current mood, I see. Well, look, it's always been my belief that women are born with an extra strain in their DNA. So I don't necessarily disagree with what is being said, but I don't think you can generalize like that. I know enough number of women leaders who are actually pretty poor leaders. So I don't think leadership is better practiced by a particular sex or a particular gender. Let me put it like that. But it so happens that in the current times, we are seeing a lot of women leaders who are making excellent decisions, and those decisions are turning out to be, real path breakers or game changers. And I would say that that is exactly because of the approach that they are taking. You see, if you do a lot of research into these people, they have it would be very easy for an expert like myself, or even a layman for that matter, to identify that somebody has spoken to them about positive psychology. And it just so happens that they are women as well. But I will concede that they do have an extra strain in their DNA, and they are better equipped to take especially empathetic decisions. But it's not necessarily always the case. Let me add a rider.
Okay. So we have a question from Sarvin. He says, in a case where today we are not able to find happiness anytime, all we see is conflicts, especially when our nature is optimistic, yet we don't find a reason to say wake and get off our beds. We don't find any resources. Our purpose in life is shaken, lost interest in life. All the whys are shaken, not suicidal, but totally not caring about life. How do we deal in such situations?
So the first thing is, that's a mouthful of a question which I cannot answer in such kind of a session, because it seems to me that what was the name you mentioned?
Sarvin.
Can you spell it out, please? It's not clear.
Sarvil.
Okay, Sarvil.
It's a very different name.
Yeah,
Very unique name.
it is. It is. I would say to you, Sarvil, there is no way that you cannot find something to look forward to in life. And there are 1,001 things that I could tell you which would bring some change in your attitude, if it is your attitude, or I don't know whether it's you're speaking on behalf of somebody else. But there are many things to look forward to create a different attitude. So I would say that this is a conversation that probably needs to be had offline. But a few simple things. I mean, one of the things which I do every day, which makes life worth living, is I just breathe standing amongst trees. And that tells me that everything else, whatever be the problem, COVID or no COVID or whatever, that all sinks away, because I'm standing in nature and nature is beautiful. And if nature is beautiful, then life is beautiful. And that's all that matters. So that's one thing you could practice. There are many other techniques that one could talk about.
In fact, that was his next question. He also further asked, how does positive psychology help us individually? And in our practice, if we come across clients who face this situation, how would you take it up?
Again, very, very pointed questions, Sarvel, which require detailed answers. I'm not sure this is the right platform to be answering these questions. But yes, I mean, you look, you will come across people who have challenges and who seem to feel that all hope is lost. This morning, I had such a client, and you will come across these kind of things. But the first thing is, one of the things about positive psychology is you need to ask yourself, if you're a person who's trying to help somebody else, do you believe in it or not? If you don't believe in it, then there is no question of you going and helping somebody else. So first you need to create that and foster that atmosphere within yourself. You need to have that running through your veins. And I'm not, again, let me clarify, I'm not talking about positive thinking and secret. And I'm talking about the fact that you need to believe those assumptions that we spoke about. You need to create that moment in your life, and only then will you be able to take that forward with others. So practice the things which are spoken about in terms of the key belief systems, the key assumptions, and the goals that can be taken forward. Look at PERMA as a model. Look at where the connection is with you, because it's not necessarily that PERMA will connect with everybody on all 5 fronts. There may be only one front which connects with you. Then take that forward and work from there. That would be my advice, just loosely.
Well, adding to that question from Sarvil, I also wanted to ask you one more thing. So when a practitioner is practicing as a positive psychologist, are there any specific forms of interventions, or it's just the approach that's a bit different?
It's the approach. And see, as I said to you, at the moment, I think the theory of well-being is the only scientifically put together model that is being used. But Dr. Barbara Fredrickson is working on something when in the last communication that I had with her. And again, as I said to you, this is a field that is very new. We don't have enough people to do the research. So all the research is being done by the experts themselves, and which is why the specific interventions, as you rightfully called it, really don't exist at the moment. It's more the approach. But maybe in the next 3 to 4 years, you will see a lot of toolkits and a lot of new stuff that will come out, which will make it that much easier. It'll be like a set toolkit for a particular situation.
So as of now, what we indulge in is something on the lines of talk therapy, art therapy.
Yeah, you could say that. You could say that. Even a lot of people, what they're doing is, I recently met someone who is a practicing positive psychologist, and she said to me that she's using a lot of NLP technique. So, for example, getting over limiting self-beliefs and the theories that NLP has in that. And so there are people who are marrying various other, other philosophies and other approaches to come up with their own kind of toolkits. And that's exactly what's happening at the moment. There isn't anything. I mean, if anybody has something, I haven't heard about it as of now.
Then just wanted to talk a bit about the happiness index, which has been used to define the country and their growth in itself. So what is your take on that?
I don't know. I mean, all of these indexes and all of these various models, they have a particular aspect in approach. So I'll correlate this to the first time I was introduced to the MBTI kind of assessment. And what I realized is that an MBTI assessment has a lot of loopholes in it. And there are certain particular times when you need to do it. You need to be in an environment which is different, etc., etc., etc. So all of these indexes, even the happiness index, very subjective. I'm not sure that you can actually quantify something like that and put a number to it and say that India ranks uh, so and so. It's a research. It's a questionnaire which has been circulated. There are various parameters that have been put, and people have put their own version onto it, and then they said, okay, so and so ranks here, and so ranks here. I'm not very comfortable with that kind of approach. My personal view.
So India actually ranks 144 out of 156.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Okay. Oh, I just wanted to also talk that when you were talking about how people respond to crisis situation.
Yeah.
So for my training, I also have a psycho-oncology background,
Yes.
and there's terminology which is called post-traumatic growth,
Yes.
which is a beautiful, beautiful thought process. And in fact, yesterday we were having a conversation about psychological first aid, and we said that, after a crisis event, people undergo a lot of change which happens.
Right.
Their thought processes, ideologies, beliefs, everything may undergo a change, which is
Right.
beautiful.
Right.
So just wanted to mention that. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
We have another question from Shushti. She says, how can positive psychology help in overcoming overthinking?
Oh wow. Okay. So that's an interesting one, and again, this is something that I've been asked earlier also, and I've encountered people who seem to have this rather wonderful attitude of approaching issues from various angles and ruminating and thinking. I think my take on this is that positive psychology makes things much clearer, allows you to separate the issue at hand from the overlying and overarching kind of issues that are surrounding it, which forces you to think. And therefore, it makes life much simpler. And that's why I specifically stressed on the three golden circles. So, a positive psychology helps you to find out the why. Once you find out the why, the overthinking aspect of your life will get sorted out in most areas.
On that term, there is another question from Priya Darshini. Since it's related, that is why I'm asking it right now. How
Hmm.
do we silence the negative voices that tells us that we're good for nothing? Are there any techniques to increase self-worth and get a positive self-image?
Look, one of the things that I've seen over the years is that, techniques aside, there are some very basic things that one needs to understand about one's psyche. So, if you're talking about the negative thoughts that occur, one of the things as a person that you need to do before you seek any professional help or anything of that sort is you need to ask yourself why you think like that. You need to ask yourself, and that's why I mentioned in the beginning that what shapes you as a person are the three E's: environment, experience, and education. And if you're able to decipher, or you're able to get to the root of what those experiences are, so you could draw out one of the techniques that I prescribe to a lot of clients is what I like to call the Jivan Sarita, or the river of life, which is basically drawing a river on a piece of paper and trying to list down the various experiences from the time you were born, as far back as you remember, till date. That will help you to understand where the root cause of this particular negative feeling is. It will also help you to understand where those happiness moments are, and it will give you the recourse that you need to overcome that. This is something that has worked for many people. In a couple of sessions or three sessions itself, they've come back and said that life has taken on a new meaning because they've been able to overcome. Again, I would say here that a lot of positive psychologists are blending in the NLP tools and using those along with the approach of positive psychology to help you overcome this negative uh, thought process or a limiting self-belief kind of scenario.
So guys, just a quick time check. It's already 6 p.m. Dr. Asad, will you be open to taking just two more questions that I
Sure,
see? I think
sure,
not be
sure, sure. Why not?
okay. There's a question from Apurva. So the question is, what are some of the upcoming research areas or topics that are gathering interest in the field of positive psychology?
I think I already mentioned the two main areas that are being researched on are one is what I'm doing, and I know that there are some other people who are doing it as well. Is that who are those others? When it says that, one of the belief systems of positive psychology is that the connection to others. So one of the a very popular research being undertaken currently at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where Dr. Barbara Fredrickson is head faculty and head of the department, is exactly this, is that they're also trying to find out that what are those others, or who are those others with whom you feel that connection, and how does that tie in with everything? Is it that with every person whom you come into contact with, you need to have a connection, and therefore that works, or is it that there are specific connections? So that's one of the things which is being researched. And the other thing which is being researched, as I said, is that how to create another model or another theory or another toolkit apart from PERMA to work with people to help them understand their positive relationships, the meaning of life, their engagements, the flow theory. Flow theory is very new in itself. And so there are these three, as far as I know, and I'm sure there are many more. But, these three come to mind immediately.
There's a question from Ashna. The question is, how can one differentiate between eudaimonia and hedonism in real life? Both tends to overlap each other.
It does, but as I said, that eudaimonia has more to do. So, okay, good question. Let me say eudaimonia has an indirect link with others, whereas hedonism is totally self-driven. That's the best way to. I see Sarvil's photograph. Nice picture. So that's the best way to differentiate. Eudaimonia is more to do with self and others, and hedonism more to do only with self. So let's put it like that.
And the last question, which is from Akriti, the question is, does positive psychology undermine depression and anxiety?
No, I don't think it does. But I don't think you should, if I can coin a word, I don't think you should overmind depression and anxiety either. I saw her taking a lot of notes. She had her camera on initially. So I'm assuming that she was making copious notes to ask me these questions.
That's another Akriti.
But no, it doesn't undermine that. All it says is that it is a different approach. It's an approach which, wants you to enjoy the best of life, to realize that, and that's why it very clearly acknowledges crisis. No, what is crisis? Depression and anxiety are also crisis. There are times when you just go mad, you don't know what to do. Things in front of you seem to be just blowing up in your face. You're sad for no reason. You're depressed. You're anxious all the time. So it acknowledges them. It doesn't undermine them. I think one of the beautiful things about positive psychology is that it acknowledges the existence of these things, and it wants to work around them, taking them along to help you to overcome them. That's how I would answer her question, and congratulate her on taking so many notes.
Thank you so much for all the questions. Just one thing I wanted to share with you, Dr. Asad. So for me, when I was pursuing my master's, positive psychology was one of the subjects that we had. Right. And one of the saddest thing is it was one of the most boring subject because it was taught to us in the lecture method. So we were taught all these heavy words, PERMA, flow, eudaimonia, hedonism. But what it really means, it is only when I started practicing and reading about positive psychology.
Absolutely.
When I understood and I realized that while education does play an important role, the way it is explained plays even more important role.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. That is why we have so many classrooms which are empty, where the students are in the college canteen having chai and samosa.
True, that's so true. And with that, thank you so much, Dr. Asad, for such a beautiful session. I am sure we all are going back with a new approach in our thinking process, and we're going to be adding a lot of these things in our own practice. And I know many of you guys are not from mental health profession, but associated with health altogether. So I hope this has helped you. And just one query, Dr. Asad, would you be free to take up personal questions if anyone has, and they can probably email it to you directly?
Yes, yes, why not? I'll be very happy to. But I would say I would like to say something with your permission, Shima.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely.
you know, you can't really explain these things in an email. So when you send me an email, I may respond to you or I may send you my number. It would be better to talk. And don't worry. I mean, whatever you discuss with me, whatever you talk to me, it is obviously very, very confidential. So understand that when you write something, it generally comes out not meaning what you intend. So it's always better to talk over a call or a video call or whatever to get the real perspective of what the challenge is. That's just something which I wanted to add. Thank you so much for allowing me to do that.
Dr. Asad, we've got a last very interesting question, which I want you to take it up. The question is, sir, do you also act as a supervisor for PhD thesis?
Well, look, I don't. I won't deny that I do, but I don't do it for candidates who do PhDs from Indian universities, because the very reason why I chose my PhD from a foreign university was because the approach is totally different. The approach in Indian universities is very theoretical. There's hardly any research done, and the focus is more on preparing copious notes and huge thesis rather than doing a practical kind of a field work kind of thesis. So if you're open to taking up a PhD from a foreign university and you want my guidance, I'm very happy to. Indian universities, I'm not so keen.
Thank you so such a honest response to that. And with that, thank you everyone for joining us in this session, and wishing you all the very best. And thank you so much, Dr. Asad. It has been
Thank you,
lovely
Shruti.
to have
Thank
you
you
on.
very much. Lovely to speak with you as well, and thank you, everyone. I wish you well.
Okay, bye bye, everyone.
Bye.